Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. Today is an introductory podcast to a big subject. That is, our schools are failing our children. Primarily, it's not so much for those already homeschooling, but for those who are waking up to what is happening in our schools and don't know what to do about it. If you're coming across questions, comments, or conversations, pass on this podcast, because it's one thing to know about a problem, but coming up with a solution is a different ball game completely. Making changes could affect most areas in your life. However, if it's true that schools are failing our children, many parents will want to know what to do. I am reading more expose on these concerns. One of the names I see regularly is Elwyn Poole, Poole, sounding an alarm for anyone who wishes to know more and providing links to see what is in the New Zealand curriculum. There is now no excuse for saying, "I didn't know." As in law, ignorance is no excuse for breaking it, and the internet raises your chances of finding these things. I've also been listening to Reality Check Radio, where you can hear Marie interviewing Marty Gibson each week on what's happening in the newspapers. He has a regular comment on education. That's one of the links I have below. Together they talked about how educating talented kids is seen to drive inequality and inequity, leading to a deliberate holding of them back. There's no meritocracy, but kids want to strive or aspire to something. It comes naturally to them. And what of the joy of winning and the lesson of losing? They also discuss how teachers are becoming discouraged. Also this week, I listened to Ian Cummings being interviewed, where he spoke about changing over to a Christian school and being on a school board. There are many more examples of information in the public arena, which is there for anyone wanting to find it. It's not hard. The curriculum is failing our children and those who have already grown and are now in our workforce. Over 50%, that's 50, leave school unable to read, are innumerate, and can't write. This isn't a guess, but a known piece of data. But it's been getting worse for decades to get to that percentage and still not being efficiently addressed. That is, changing the way and what is taught to see this unacceptable figure drop massively. If it's 50% in this group, what of the others who can read, write, or numerate somewhat, or at least inadequately? What percentage is this group? And just how many are leaving school able to read, write, and numerate at the level necessary to participate well in society? We don't have these other two percentages. I suspect employers may have a good idea. I don't know that I trust the universities to be fully transparent about the capabilities of students coming through. A low reading ability leads to low comprehension, also leading to inability to form one's own thinking. How is that not deliberate? Or is that an accidental outcome? A low ability to think means it's easier to get people to follow bad ideas and laws, which has to be convenient for politicians. Here is a small list, but sad to say, incomplete, each of which is worthy of its own podcast. Here are some things happening in our schools. We have climate change, which is now climate emergency. This is traumatizing to children of all ages. Whether it is accidental or deliberate, it is causing emotional trauma to children, which leads to short-term thinking and planning, which is also convenient for politicians. And why wouldn't they have short-term thinking and planning if they're being constantly taught that this climate emergency means that we're all going to blow up or something equally as dramatic in a few years' time? We have changing language. Words such as genocide, racist, Nazi, the incorrect and overuse of these words cheapens the meaning of them. The lack of knowledge of actual history is a concern, and I recommend Douglas Murray to you to discuss these ideas further. You can find him easily on YouTube and in podcasts being interviewed. Critical thinking is being merged into critical theory and made to sound the same thing, and it's not. In schools we also have sex education, including but not limited to gender ideology, being able to be a boy or girl upon choice, being in the wrong body, and affirming the child without parents' knowledge. They are being taught different ways to have sex, and they're being taught at a young age. Why does a young child need to know? When I was at school, we didn't have sex ed until the sixth form, which was 16. And I have to say, that was a bit late. We already knew the facts of life by then. But I am of the conviction that it is the parents' job for sex education and not to be delegated to schools. I have heard that there is a new submission being prepared to go to Parliament to have each school board around New Zealand with a representative from the trans community. Firstly, there should be no unelected board members. Secondly, if they do, the precedent is now set for all minorities to be represented on school boards, including Christian, because officially we're a minority. The trans ideology needs to be halted in our schools. We have allowed a little here and there to be kind, for diversity, etc. But in true leftist policy, it's never enough. More and more is demanded. The science curriculum in New Zealand now is including Maori mythology, being given equal, if not more prominence, to traditional science, which has been built up over hundreds of years. So what are your options? Like I said, it's one thing to know the problem, but what are the solutions? Let's go over a few that I have thought of. Firstly, there is the obvious option of do nothing. If this podcast and content and concerns about our children are not bothering you, then you do nothing. Either it's because you don't know, don't want to know, or perhaps you don't believe it if you do know. Well, we don't judge you, but when you need to know more, come back to find out what you can do next. Secondly, you may know what's in the curriculum and what your children are being indoctrinated with, but you will talk it through at home and undo what they're being taught. A few thoughts about this. How much time do you think it will take? They're in a classroom for 6 hours a day. Have you read the literature books, sex education and science curricula? Will the school let you have the reading lists? I've heard it's very hard to get them. Just how are you going to mitigate this? I would sincerely value your feedback and ideas in this, because I think this is many parents' approach. Your ideas may be of help to others wanting this strategy. And secondly, you know what's in the curriculum, etc., but you believe your children need to be salt and light in the school, and or you are praying for God's protection over them. I couldn't tell you how many times I've heard Christians say this to me. Some brief thoughts about this to consider. They are children amongst adults. Think about that. You would not put untrained teens or children into any other area of life to take on trained and experienced adults. It's not the child's job to be salt and light. It's yours. There would be a theology to explore around this. The school atmosphere is very different from when you were at school. For adults and grandparents who claim, I went through the public school system and it didn't harm me, to justify keeping children in school, in spite of the differences, should leave this justification out and look again. Gather the facts as they are now and reassess. Other forms of action, if you do want to take your children out of school or change the school they're in. We'll do that one first. 3. Go on the school board. Can changes be made, or does the Ministry of Education overrule? What changes can be made? You could change schools. Move from a public school to an independent or Christian school. However, if they are integrated, they're still following some of the national curriculum, so check, don't assume. Or you could take them out of school and homeschool. And now for some ideas along this. What do you do now? You need a curriculum. You can buy a boxed curriculum, that is, buy everything that you need from one company. Or you can set up your own. If you choose the bought route, there are good versions to choose from. And if you're feeling inadequate, maybe this is a good route to get you started. They can be costly. Or you can put your own curriculum together. It's not hard. It could be intimidating, I admit that, but it's not hard. And I've already put together a series of podcasts to help in this area. You can get a homeschool coach. Contact me or find someone else who does this. Go through the right procedures to take your children out of school. I have an early podcast on my channel about this. In New Zealand, you need to apply for an exemption. It may take a few weeks to be approved. Unless it's urgent to remove them from school, leave them there whilst you're getting set up. If it is urgent, remove them without fanfare, getting a doctor's certificate if necessary, along the lines of stress or mental health. Talking this through with your children is imperative, as they may not see why or accept your decision. That sentence that I've just said is so simple, but it's a really important part of this process. As I dig deeper into these points and arrange interviews, please pass on your ideas to me and what you'd like me to cover as soon as possible. Amongst the interviews I hope to get are finding homeschool parents who homeschooled and put their children back into school, asking for their advice to help others who would like to take this route. I'll try to find teachers, reading recovery aides and tertiary staff to interview, although I expect it will need to be anonymous. Other interviews that I hope to get will be changing schools, how to go about finding a Christian or an independent school. I would like to interview people who supply boxed curriculums and talk you through some options there. Finances may be an issue for many parents wanting to homeschool. I have podcasts on this too. Just go back on my channel and find them. Parenting may need to be addressed. Children who have been in daycare and school for years may not be easy to parent full time. Family relationships may need some work. But all of these hurdles can be gotten over. It won't be easy, but it's for the sake of your children, and it could be the most amazing adventure of your life. Please don't leave it up to other listeners to give me feedback. If there's something you'd like to see included or have a question as I dig deeper on these things, send me a message below or get in touch via my website. Like I said, it's a once over lightly podcast today, but there's more to come. I think you can see that this is a pretty big subject. That's all from me this week. I hope to have another interview for you next week. We'll see how we go. Until then, have a great week. Bye for now.